Hi, I'm Kevin, and this is HFX by Bike, a channel all about getting around Halifax by bike. The Bell Road painted bike lanes cover the 800-meter stretch between Robie and Sackville. They're probably one of the sets of bike infrastructure that's best connected with the rest of the city's cycling network, and they're the main path in and out of the downtown core for many cyclists. The lanes are inbound only between Robie and Summer Street, but cover both directions between Summer and Sackville. The lanes have quite a few issues, and they range in severity between quality of life improvements all the way up to major safety concerns. In today's video, I'm going to try to knock off as many of these issues as possible without completely wrecking one of the main approaches to the downtown core. The natural progression for painted lanes is to add barrier protection to prevent cars from encroaching on the bike lane. There are a few different ways of doing this. Currently, the lanes have flex posts installed during the spring and summer months on an interim basis, which basically no one likes for both safety and aesthetic reasons. If we want to upgrade to hardened physical barriers, then we have some options. Prefabricated barriers are the city's go-to. They can be implemented pretty quickly, but each barrier eats up about 0.4 meters of space, and Bell doesn't have an extra meter or so of road surface on offer, so that style is probably going to be off the table. The next alternative are elevated bike lanes. These essentially extend the curb over the space currently occupied by the painted lanes and then just place the new lanes on top of the curb. This is usually the final upgraded form that bike lanes take, but it probably makes sense to skip to this level given the space constraints on Bell. The existing lanes tend to fill with water and debris in even small weather events, so elevating them carries the bonus benefit of permanently removing this as an issue. It also tends to make winter maintenance a bit easier. There are a number of places where the existing painted lanes cut out or get crossed over by cars by design. If we're going to make them elevated or protected, then we need to think about how these points are going to work. The first conflict point comes from a bus stop between Robie and Summer. Buses pass over the lane to enter and exit the stop. When space is constrained, the city will generally have the bike lane pass in front of the transit shelter and have transit users use the bus from the bike lane. This isn't really ideal, and it seems like there's enough space available to pass the bike lane behind the transit shelter at this location, so the two groups aren't going to be in conflict as often. This is how things are done in places with more transit and cycling mode share, and you can see that as an example here with this transit stop in the Netherlands. The second conflict point is at the intersection of Bell and Summer. This slip lane cuts through the path of travel for bikes. It's an easy fix to remove the slip lane and replace it with a right turn lane. Setting the stop line for the right turn lane back relative to the stopping point for bikes and pedestrians would further improve safety. The last remaining conflict point is on approach to the Bell and Sackville intersection. The single lane of inbound car traffic splits into a left turn lane and a combined through and right turn lane. This crowds out the bike lane and forces cyclists to awkwardly merge into free-flowing traffic. At the intersection itself, the bike lane picks back up where more space becomes available. I can think of two options that might work here. The first is to keep the elevated lane the entire way through, but accept that the width of the bike lane is going to be well below the city's 1.5 meter standard for this section. With the path being elevated, this would basically have pedestrians and cyclists sharing a fairly narrow space, which definitely isn't ideal for either group. The tree cover makes it hard to estimate the exact space available, but I'm not super confident that even this solution would work. The second option is just to eliminate the left turn lane to free up the necessary space. The intersection currently has a leading left signal to allow cars moving inbound along Bell a guaranteed time to turn left onto Sackville. This occupies a lot of space on Bell, which is what creates the issue with the disappearing bike lane and eats up signal time at the intersection, and even precludes there from being a protected crossing phase for pedestrian and cyclists at the intersection. This makes it less efficient for pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers trying to get in and out of downtown via Bell, which seems pretty costly for a single turn movement. So just get rid of the left turn lane in a leading left signal, and prohibit left turns on Bell, either just during peak hours or all throughout the day. We do this in other parts of the city in order to improve traffic flow, so why not Bell? It's not like the traffic that currently makes a left turn from Bell lacks any other ways to get to the same places. This would open up enough space for the bike lane to run continuously, and as a bonus, enough space to plant something like 3 new street trees on the side of the road. I think that option resolves all the conflict points, so let's go ahead and move on to some of the broken intersections. Many of the remaining problems are centralized to the intersection of Bell and Ahern. Despite the Ahern multi-use path running directly to the outbound side of Bell Road, getting between the path and the bike lane is a bit of a pain. The placement of the curb cut means you have to awkwardly dip into the intersection and make a hairpin turn onto the path. It's definitely not a user-friendly design. If you're already on the Ahern multi-use path and you want to get into the Bell Road lanes, You run the usual problem of interfacing between a pedestrian path that allows bikes and an on-road path for bikes specifically. Here in particular, cars aren't expecting bikes to emerge from Ahern since it's a one-way street for cars, so there ends up being a lot of potential conflict points with cars in this kind of unmanaged joining with road traffic. The intersection also generates a lot of conflict points even if you're just going straight through. During rush hour, Bell becomes extremely congested. This leads to cars in the outbound lane making the last-minute decision to make a right onto Ahern to avoid waiting, often without signaling in advance and generally without checking to see if the bike lane or crosswalk are occupied. In the same scenario, cars waiting in the left turn lane to get onto Ahern only have a brief window to make their turn, which is exactly when traffic in the outbound lane is congested and can no longer move. Of course, the car lane being congested doesn't mean that the bike lane is. With the view of oncoming bikes blocked by gridlocked traffic and a lot of pressure to make the turn quickly, the intersection becomes a chaotic mess for cyclists. That's exactly what happened to a friend of mine who was hit by an inattentive driver making a left-hand turn at this intersection in June. So there's a lot of things to fix at this intersection, but I just want to knock off one of the easy ones first. I'm going to add a ramp from Bell to the existing pedestrian path that connects up to Ahern. The path will need to be widened a bit to accommodate both pedestrians and bikes simultaneously, but there isn't anything in the path that would prevent this. There are ramps like these in other parts of the bike network, wherever there's value in switching between on- and off-road infrastructure assets. This solves some of the connectivity issues I went over before. All of the remaining issues at Ahern stem from the fact that there are a lot of different paths of travel moving through the intersection without any kind of coordination. There are multiple sets of bike infrastructure present, but how they interact with motor vehicle traffic seems to have never really been considered. One option would be to signalize the left turn onto Ahern. This would be pretty catastrophic for outbound traffic flow on Bell, so the city would probably never go for that. Another option is to add more space between the path of travel of pedestrians and cyclists and drivers making the turn onto Ahern by redirecting them further up the street. I generally don't like this idea for a couple different reasons. First, because it's inconveniencing the road users who have the actual right-of-way for the sake of the convenience of those that don't. Second, because it's such a large detour, I don't think people will actually do it, which would then just make things more chaotic. I think the best approach would be to just remove the option to enter Ahern from Bell by swapping its direction from only outbound to only inbound. This removes both of the conflict points and renders the intersection safer for pedestrians and cyclists, with the only remaining conflict point being from cars emerging from Ahern. Those cars would necessarily be pinned by traffic on Bell itself, and so would be less likely to generate safety issues. It's really easy to just say, just flip the direction on Ahern, but it carries a lot of implications for how the road network in the area works. Ahern is currently outbound only and connects to the Cogswell roundabout. Its counterpart, Trollope Street, handles the inbound traffic and connects to Bell at the Summer Street intersection. So the first issue is, if Ahern becomes inbound only, how will people access it? After closing off the exit to the Cogswell roundabout, the only entry point would be via Rainy and Citadel Hill, which would look something like this. A fair criticism is that by removing the turns at both Sackville and Ahern, car traffic starts to have pretty limited options for heading north from this part of the city. Can we just take Trollope and make it a two-way street and rework a connection to Cogswell to facilitate that change? Yes, but it would be pretty terrible from a traffic flow perspective. The main function of Bell is to get traffic in and out of downtown. In the outbound direction at Bell and Summer, there are two lanes that have that option. One that allows left turn onto Summer, and then one that proceeds straight through. By allowing right turns onto Trollope, both outbound lanes would end up having most of their signal time occupied by cars waiting to make turns while pedestrians use the crosswalk. That would grind outbound traffic to essentially a halt at all times. It also reintroduces some of the turn risks to cyclists and pedestrians that we've eliminated from Ahern, albeit in a bit more of a structured setting. Re-enabling northbound movement from Bell onto Trollope would involve making a version of the Bell and Summer intersection that can efficiently move high volumes of traffic in all four directions without becoming congested. It also has to not be a death trap for cyclists and pedestrians, and also presumably not take large bites out of the surrounding land. I'm going to take inspiration from this map I came across from the city's master plan for the Halifax Commons, which imagines the problem intersection as a roundabout. That's an interesting idea, so let's see if we can make it work. The main constraint here is space, so as a proof of concept, I'm going to take a multimodal roundabout from a place that's pretty good at designing them. In this case, it's a roundabout from Eindhoven in the Netherlands, and I'm going to essentially just drop it at a 1-to-1 scale at the intersection. And hey look, it fits fine. The way this type of roundabout works is that the inner circle is for motor vehicle traffic, the middle ring is for bikes, and the outermost ring is for pedestrians. Buffer space between the inner ring and the entry-exit points for the roundabout and the orientation of the path of travel requires drivers to slow down at the points where they can conflict with the other modes of travel. This is essentially a single lane design, so if you're driving, you just exit at whichever street you want to go to. And the only thing that you have to really process is whether there's something in front of you or not. That should be doable by most drivers. I've added the link in the description to the Google Maps location for the roundabout in the real world, just so that you can have a look on the ground view and see what it looks like. Trollope would lose about a lane worth of parking. You can get more than that back by using space more efficiently on Cogswell, but I'm going to save that for the Let's Fix video on the Halifax Commons. And to be clear, the roundabout and all of the associated changes are for drivers. It actually isn't necessary to improve the safety for cyclists and pedestrians. One of the entryways to Bell Road is via the Willow Intersection. This massive 5-way intersection between Quinpool, Robie, Cogswell, and Bell is not comfortable to bike through. And if you're going to the trouble of upgrading bike facilities on Bell, you might as well plug it into the rest of the network. Zooming out, the existing bike network doesn't really connect through the Willow intersection, but it's not hard to imagine how it could. By converting the Bell Summer intersection to a roundabout, we free up about 3.5 meters worth of space along Bell between Robie and Summer. We can take some of that space and double the width of the bike lane so that it can be bidirectional. This then makes adding a crossing at Willow pretty straightforward, since there only needs to be a single crossing point and it can just use the existing signal time. This would then connect to a short multi-use path running up Quinpool to Pepperell, which would then become a bikeway. All in, this would make for an easier time getting to and from Bell for trips that are west of Robie and south of Quinpool. There are some other things that could be done to improve traffic flow for all modes through this intersection, but I'm going to leave that for the Commons video. Those are some ways that I would improve the Bell Road painted bike lanes. Let me know in the comments which improvements you like and if I've missed anything. And if you like this kind of thing, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. As always, thanks for watching and see you next time.